of Christmas my true love gave to me. Three French hens. Ooh, I'm not the singer everybody else at our law firm is. Hey, my name is Jessi Oatby. I'm one of the senior lawyers here at Hembree Law Firm, and I'm here to talk to you today about traveling internationally with your children during the holidays. Do you have plans to take your chickies to Paris this year? Well, I have some tips for you. The first thing I want to talk about is traveling internationally and co-parenting. If you look at your divorce decree or your custody arrangement, there should be provisions in there discussing international travel, passports, things like that. The first place that I would look if I was going to be traveling internationally with my children, I have children, my two children, if I was traveling internationally with my kids, is to what the title would be international travel provisions. Now, your international travel provisions are going to tell you how you need to communicate with your co-parent what your travel plans are. There are going to be two documents or two forms that oftentimes are referenced in your divorce decree or your custody agreement, your custody order. And those two documents are your notice of intent to travel outside the United States or your your consent to travel outside the United States. And so, one question I get a lot asked to me is, do I have to tell the other parent or get the other parent's permission to travel? And the answer to that question is yes, if you're traveling internationally, but no, if you're not traveling internationally. However, I think it's best practice for co-parenting that you notify the other parent if you're going to be traveling for any extended period of time outside of the state. I know personally, to maintain a good co-parenting relationship, I think that it is helpful to let the other parent know if you're going to be traveling at all. But I understand, privacy. You don't always want to be telling, your ex where you're going and what you're doing. Totally get that. But if you are traveling internationally, it is required. And so the other place where we talk about international travel is when it comes to passports. Typically, in your divorce decree or your custody order, there's a section that tells you who has the right to maintain the passports, who has the right to apply for the passports, who has the right to hold them when nobody's traveling, and what the provisions are regarding exchanging passports. Typically, most people's orders, decrees, or custody orders say that you need to exchange or you need to give the other parent passports, your kids' passports within 10 days of the request. And you can only really withhold consent and giving passports in good faith. And what I mean by that is you have to have a really good reason to withhold consent for international travel. And what I've seen in courts do before is obviously withholding consent to travel to a war zone would be a reason, a good faith reason to withhold consent, or withholding consent to travel somewhere where there's the epicenter of a pandemic, right? Those might be considered good reasons to withhold consent to travel. Not good reasons to withhold consent to travel is, I don't like where she's going. I don't like who he's going with, right? Those aren't good reasons. And so when you are filling out these notices of intent to travel, the information that's going to be included in these notices are the who, what, wheres, and whens, right? You need to tell your co-parent who you're going with and who you're going to be staying with. You need to tell your other co-parent where you're going, including itineraries, travel plans, things like that. You need to tell your other parent when you're going and when you're coming back, right? And so, again, there are some standard forms that people use for these notices, but really writing this information out and delivering it to your co-parent is best practice. The other thing to consider whenever you're traveling internationally, especially around the holidays, is what the standard possession order says and whether or not it is your time to have possession of the kids so that you can travel. Okay, so the standard possession order typically says that one parent has the kids from the time school lets out for the holiday break through December 28th at noon, and the other parent has the kids from December 28th at noon through the day before school goes back into session or ending at the time school starts. So what that means is if your plane doesn't get back until December 29th and you've had the kids since the time school let out, you're in violation of your order if you're not exchanging the kids by noon on December 28th. Now, look, there are great co-parents in the world, and you can agree to whatever you want to agree to outside this court order, right? I know personally, I would love for my kids to be able to go travel internationally for the holidays. And so if we were talking about a couple of hours, in violation of the order, I would certainly agree to it. But again, not everybody is the same, and not everybody has that relationship. So I completely understand, needing to maintain these parameters. So just be aware of when your possession would end. Also, if you have access provisions like phone calls or FaceTime or anything like that, those are also still in effect. And so if you always have phone calls at 7 o'clock, Texas time, but you're going to be traveling, taking your kids to Germany for Christmas, then you're going to need to still figure out a way to make those phone calls work. Again, communication is key. Communicating with your co-parent, letting them know that like, hey, that's not good. That time's not going to work. That's going to be in the middle of the night or super early in the morning. Kids aren't going to be up. Talking about that ahead of time is key. And hopefully that will all work out and go a lot more smoothly if it's all discussed ahead of time. But if it's not discussed ahead of time and you're trying to have that conversation when that first phone call is meant to take place, then it's going to be a lot less likely that you're going to be able to work that out. And it's really going to kind of bum your travel out. You don't want to be arguing with your ex while you're in this like beautiful location trying to show your kids like these beautiful sights, right? The other thing I wanted to talk about was, again, going back a little bit to this idea of withholding consent. I did want to add one thing, that if somebody withholds consent for travel, or doesn't give passports up, or that parent, if it's not really in good faith, can be liable for travel expenses that have already been incurred, and that are either non-refundable, or just didn't know until the last minute, right? That parent can be responsible for those expenses. I have two kids and I have traveled with them by myself before. And so I do have some practical tips for traveling with your kids during the holidays. Number one, and my kids are right now, they're 6 and 8. And so traveling with them is super fun. But it also can be a little bit stressful. So my first tip is prepare. Right? We are not 20-year-old free spirits anymore, right? We need to have plane tickets, we need to have hotel plans, we need to have our car seats if we're taking car seats, or arrangements in a rental car to have car seats, right? Think ahead about all the things that you need for your kids. Entertainment, right? Bring those headphones. Bring books, coloring, whatever your kids are into. So just prepare, right? The next tip that I have is bring a friend, right? Two pair of eyes is better than one when you're in a busy Chicago airport trying to get from one plane to the other. I personally like traveling with my mom. And so, man, two sets of eyes is like a lifesaver when you're in a busy airport. And then my third tip is either fly direct or get carry-on scooters that are carry-ons that convert to scooters. So if you've got a quick connecting flight like we did, man, getting across the Atlanta airport in 45 minutes, walking with two children, dragging them behind you versus letting them just on their travel scooters, big difference. Big difference. And it was fun. So it was me trying to catch up to them, not me running ahead of them and hoping that they're following along, right? So just those are my travel tips, my practical travel tips for these holidays. I hope you have a really, really fun holiday. I hope you get the opportunity to go see some sights. And just remember, preparation brings peace. And the name of the game this holiday season is Peace on Earth. It's really good talking to you guys, and happy holidays.